Oh, there you go.
All right.
Let's start with roll call. Cynthia Green,
Adam Brenneman.
Shane Wooten, Evan Church. Brad Wiles.
Rochelle James.
Eric Rao. Eric Anderson.
okay. You have before you February 1st, 2023 minutes, all 6 pages of them. Are there any corrections or additions? Nothing. Oh,
Chair, at the risk of sounding vain, my name is spelled the same way as the other Eric, so just to keep things easy,
oh,
want to make sure that all Eric's consistent.
are we K's or C's?
Kate's.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you. Okay, any seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, with the second and approved minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, nay? It passes. Okay. Well, first report is from Brad Lyles. Thank you for coming to us this time.
Marsha,
It's been a long time.
yeah, it has. Cynthia, or I mean, Chief Harmon has expressed her brief sadness that she wasn't here tonight. She's over at the Oregon Chiefs Conference in Bend with several of our administrators. So she left me a few documents to go over with our reports. First, I'm going to give you a kind of a snapshot on our hiring. Should be a handout with some the bottom section really is our 2023 hiring. We've hired one. We have 2 also pending for 3 police officers. We're hiring for a clerk and also for 4 dispatchers. But we're additionally hiring for we had hired a community service officer. But in the hiring process, right, they're not really counted as bodies for quite a while. I currently have 5 that have been hired. 4 of them are at the academy and 1 still in training. So that's 5 bodies that really don't, I mean, count that they have a job, that's awesome. And we're happy to have them and we're filling, but you know, it's anywhere from once they're out of after the academy, you know, 6 to 8 months, because it's an 18-month probationary period. So we don't readily see them solo for the first year to, 12 to 18 months, depending on whether they're a lateral or a new officer, a young officer. So there's quite a bit of training. So while the numbers look good and they're very promising, we're pleased that we continue to get good candidates. It's still a very slow process. So
Has it been as competitive or has that settled down a little bit?
There's been some competition, but we probably haven't seen the levels of work and life and education experience that meet a standard that we want. We're not about lowering standards. We need to keep the standards where they are. And so we've had some applicants, but the same, we want to make sure they're the proper fit, they have the proper education, and of course, background's still a lot as well. So not that we weed through them, but we do. We pay very close attention in the hiring process. And for the past several years, we've been doing that, and our backgrounders are in-house now. We don't have any external backgrounders. So our officers, sergeants, and some detectives are doing them. So they're very thorough. It makes a big difference. That plays a big role, right? Staffing plays a big role in our numbers in reports. What it doesn't play a role in are reported numbers from the public, right? For instance, the top portion of the spreadsheet, you'll see Albany Police Department's Narcan use. Currently in 2023, we already have 38, and that wasn't counting this last week. We have 31 overdoses, so that's on par to break 120 plus overdoses in the year, which will be 40, almost 40 or more above 2022, and we already have 3 fatalities. And that also doesn't take into account AFD's use as well, because there's times that we are on separate calls And they may have something where before we get there, AFD may be out there using Narcan, or the public may be using Narcan because it's becoming more and more readily available, which we're encouraging, right? We want, most places to have it, schools, businesses, right? Yeah, to have it for those, really to have it on hand. It's kind of like a defibrillator, right? If it's not there, it's not any good. So the more you have out in the public, the more lives it's going to save. So, but it's a sad fact that currently that trend is still going up.
Question about the Narcan being
Yeah.
available. I heard that it's just now been legalized to sell it over the counter, and if that is the case, what kind of pricing are we looking at? Is the average person gonna be able to go out and buy one?
Well, I haven't seen what the pricing is going to be. Our pricing is a 2-dose pack for $35.
So you know it's gotta be higher.
Well, I don't know that. In fact, we can get stuff elsewhere, and we can get some for free when it's available. We have, and we have some resources now from a settlement that is covering the costs of our Narcan. So when it's less readily available, we have to purchase it. So we have some reimbursement. The city has seen a reimbursement benefit. So that will help, because that Narcan, it's not really an unfunded mandate, but it's a safety feature that, every place should have it, right? And so there's a lot of agencies across the nation that don't have it. We're fortunate, we're trying to be ahead of the game and to have that. So, but even with it, it's a Band-Aid, it's not stopping the problem. So that's.
All those numbers like that, I mean, that's a lot of volume of use, that's a lot of stocking, that's a lot of maintenance of that supply, right? So
Yeah,
it's not just a matter of having it on hand.
And does it have a long shelf life?
it's got a couple years, but to be honest with you, it probably lasts twice as long as what they say. It's probably still
Better than
effective. Yeah, it's most medications, they give you a shelf life. I've talked to my doctor many times. Most medications have quite a long shelf life, even after
Most
expiration.
all our medications, 2 years, and we buy them, but then we can recycle them and get shipped to other countries to be administered there.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's good. As far as the crime snapshot, which is the orange, green, yellow dot, the first two, after the group A offenses, the first two columns you see are March of 22 and March of 23. And so those are essentially March numbers of 2022 in the crime categories and reporting categories, and March of 2023. So if you notice down in the middle, larceny from vehicles from March to March, just on the snapshot of the month, we had more this year than last. Larceny other, which is thefts from all other things, is up, 47%. And vandalism is up 72%. And weapons laws are up 36%. So when you take a monthly snapshot, that's what you're seeing in the month last year and then the month this year. As you go across to the percentage of change from year to date, really our domestics show up for that month from January to March for the year to date. Our burglary businesses show up, and our burglary others are up. And granted, it says 200%, but you go from 1 to 3, right? It's the numbers, the percentages look, wow, my gosh, 200%, but you're 1 to 3. But when you add those up, if you added 3 up every month and you're up that much every month, it can be a considerable number if it keeps going. So that's one of those. The vandalism is probably one of the bigger things when you're going from 74 year to date to 114. There's a lot more vandalism this year. Yeah.
What's pushing that?
I really don't. We used to deal with and still do a lot of vandalism like graffiti, right? So kids, young adults, they go out and just spray paint or mark or Sharpie and do things up. Some are gang related, some are just monikers, some are, murals. I mean, whatever they want, they do all of it. But it seems to be up. Vandalism can also be breaking or damaging items, right? Well, sometimes they'll be better known as criminal mischief, but, just damaging city property, for instance, shrubs or other things like that, if they don't get categorized.
Grudge against the trees on Lion Street.
Yeah, there can be grudges against all kinds of things like that, and we repair them because we don't want it to look, the city repairs them, they don't want to look bad. They're there for a reason. Dispatched calls, we are up in dispatched calls, about 2%, about 52 extra calls in this year to date. Self-initiated calls go from 3,800 to 3,100, and as I was discussing just before the meeting started, is some of that is statistics are great, but it doesn't show when you have a diminished number of employees, like I'm down, the department's down, I got 5 in training, and we still got several more to hire. That's a patrol squad, right? So the folks that are left are fielding all the calls, and when there's a higher incidence of calls, there's less time to do proactive work. So they're responding to the dispatch calls that are there, but the self-initiated calls are down because there's not the same manpower staffing. Be like if you're in the business, if you have 16 vehicles come in for repair, but you only have 2 employees, you're only gonna get 1 or 2 done. But if you had 10 employees, you get them all done. We're kind of the same way, is that self-initiated work is on the low end until we're fully staffed.
So that means we should think about that stat sort of in concert with or in parallel with the number of hours patrolled, or what's the sort of raw?
Yeah, so
I mean, I'm thinking it's not number of officers, right? Because that's not.
no, and typically what you see a percentage of time during your day that's unobligated time. And, the studies that I've done in my 29 years, or that I've seen done, is typically 10 to 11% of your day may be unobligated, where you could go do traffic, or you could go do a drug, a self drug investigation, you could go look for a car prowler at night, or you could do those things. But when you only have the certain number of staff to go to the calls, you don't have unobligated time, right? So you got to get your reports done, you got to get your evidence in, you got to, go to training and do all these things. So when the manpower is less, we have fewer employees on, the self-initiated calls are what you see going down. But kind of what that tells you in the future is that if calls for service are up and we get fully staffed, and those self-initiated calls go up, we're going to be higher again, right? It's just going to keep going up. We like to see them have some unobligated time. It lets them really attack community problems in their districts. And that's a good focus, and we'll continue to maintain that. And they all have these districts for their entire shift, right? For their rotation of their shift, they stay in their district. So that's kind of I won't say the misnomer on stats, but that's kind of how they work. Biggest thing is our priority P and 1 calls. Those are the most serious calls. But year to date, those are up 21%. Those are calls for service for serious offenses. That speaks volumes for us, because those are multiple officer calls, right? Those are 2, 3, and 4 officer calls. Sometimes, like we had a shooting, 7 or 8 officer call, multiple agencies. So we don't like to see those priority 1 calls going up. We like them to stay the same or diminish. But that's, I think, indicative of us being a town of 60,000 now, not 35, 40.
What falls into the P1 bucket?
Well, you have your domestics, assaults, person crimes, robberies, their priority 1 categories. They're not your basic thefts or your in progress calls. So things that are immediate, and then the higher felonious crimes. So those are what we really don't want to see increasing. We want to see them maintain the same.
Is person with a weapon considered?
Yes. Yep. And as well as you can see our weapons offenses, one of the things we've noticed is our weapons. We've been seizing and seeing a lot more weapons and dealing with them.
This is probably a dumb question, easy to answer, but how come those are fractional? That's what those on those.
That's just, they just put it in there that way. They just a true statistic. I don't, and again, I look more at, I round up or down.
Absolutely, no
I-
problem.
yeah.
I'm not questioning the number.
Sure.
I was curious if there was some
No,
Relation happening there that.
no, it's a program, right? So our crime analyst, he plugs in the numbers and it's nice because it spits out
Yeah.
kind of an exact, even though we know it's not. I mean, it is exact, but it's,
It looks
we,
really precise.
right, we're not gonna consider it that. We're looking at a general percentage of where the crime rate is rising. And then, these also allow us to put more, when we have them, put more resources into those areas. If we're fully staffed, when I was running the community resource unit, in 15, 16, 17, I would take my unit out and we would go out at night, and instead of doing a day shift, I'd say, hey, we're gonna take a day off in the summer, we're gonna go out and patrol at night. And it's an extra group of people to go out and attack people who are either vandalizing, breaking into cars, or doing business burglaries. And we'll try and focus on the higher crime areas. And that's really what crime statistics are meant to do, is allow you to see real-time crime stats go up. Where do you put your eggs in that basket, your resources? We want to get back, that's what we're really trying to get back to. And that's with the chief wanting to get back and a traffic unit back on, and some proactive patrols, and having a full detectives, full group of detectives. So that's the focus. We'd all like more officers, but
Budget is the budget.
budget is the budget.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the department's going right now, and crime stats for this month. What we're seeing.
I want to congratulate you for the national recognition. So,
Thank you. We have a fantastic accreditation manager, Merritt Smith. She does a wonderful job. Both of our last 2 cycles of accreditation, they did our reviews, 0 questions, passed wonderfully. We have our April online, in April, the end of this month, we have an online, they're gonna review our policies, and then they'll come out for a visit. I think it's end of May or June, they'll come out for the visit, and then we pass everything. The awards is in November up in Bellevue, Washington. So we're excited to do it. It's paid big dividends for us. It has us with the best practice policies on a national level, and an international level, really. And so it really makes sure that you're doing things the right way. So. Oh, yeah. So there's also state accreditation, and it's good. We're one of only 3 departments that are CALIA accredited in the state. So it's a big thing. We want to keep it that way. What's that?
Are they bigger departments?
Corvallis and Hillsborough, I believe. So,
Isn't that interesting? None of the big ones.
well, it's quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, without Merritt just doing it full time, it would be very difficult to do. I mean, when we were state accredited, we had lots of hands in the pie, and we were always looking at, and we're still always looking at policy and procedure, but Merritt keeps it going constantly every day. And that's, whether it's the strategic plan, our annual reports, our public facing documents, training records, all those things that CALIA helps us push out to the public and makes us more visible, so that we're transparent, right? That's the thing that does it. And people are, oh, I want to see your policy. You can find them all online. Just go online and see our policies. So
Do you use Lexipol for policies? Or?
we do not. We used to use Lexipol.
Yeah.
So we run all of our stuff through Power DMS.
Okay.
So we do all of our own policies, and Power DMS is a program that we run
That's the sort
here.
of management system that
Yep.
you're using there. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're switching to Lexipol right now. We're in the middle of the process.
Yeah.
We received a grant from our insurance carrier to make the switch over.
People have opinions about that, but I don't know enough to have one myself. Probably, but,
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So from the standpoint of fire department, keeping policies up to date with limited staff and assuring our policies are legal and the best practice, I think it's really beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
From an employee standpoint, I don't know that our people are super thrilled about it.
Sure.
Because they're new policies, and then they also have a program where they get they will be getting weekly emails asking them questions.
Yeah.
And they
And
need to
it'll have your
answer
checklist,
appropriately.
and
according to the
the board is
policy.
read, I'm sure, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Huh. Interesting, thank you.
Any other questions for police? Okay, then
Oh, thank you.
we are on to fire. Shane. All right.
Chair, can I, I'm sorry, can I one go back? I beg your pardon.
Absolutely.
Sorry. Do you have any public events coming up? Any engagement with?
No, we just finished our, God, we just finished probably a couple, month and a half ago, so we should have another one coming up.
You guys have the one about fentanyl next week.
Well, we do have the fentanyl presentation and that, it should have been published. It should have came out. We got the theater out at Lynn Benton.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so, and that's a public, and we're expecting, well, we're hoping to get a couple hundred people, community members, so, yeah. Thank you, that was right, that was.
I guess I do have, I'm sorry, I do have one follow-up question. I beg your pardon. Sorry for enough now. I know that last year and actually previous years, both departments have supported the Pride event in the summertime
Yep.
very strongly. And I'm actually, full disclosure, going to be the liaison, volunteer liaison.
Oh, good.
For that event. But one of the things that last year came to my attention was that last year was the year that the Pride event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, had a bunch of chuckleheads show up looking to cause trouble. Long guns and body armor and all kinds of stuff they were rolling up with, and the Coeur d'Alene police and the sheriff's office there scooped them up and made a pile of arrests, I think 30-some arrests of those folks. But it raised sort of everybody's level of concern about Pride events, and there have been another of other things since then.
Yeah.
That have done the same thing, and again, I'm not questioning the support from your agency, which has been great. But some of my friends who work sort of in state agency stuff tell me that there's a nomination process for events that you can put forward, that the local law enforcement would have to submit the event through that nomination process to the, it's called SERE, S-E-R-E. I don't remember the last E stands for. It's special event, rating, something. Yeah, it's a USDHS thing. Anyway, I'll do some research. We can talk later. But I just wondered if there were any other sort of public events in Albany that you were thinking about in that same regard.
What
with that same lens.
what we really do is we get the requests from these groups. And so we get the request for support for the events. We don't always just insert ourselves in the events, right? We want to do that when Black Lives Matter came and they were doing
Right.
the
That's
protests.
great.
That the same thing is that we're there, our function is there so that it's peaceful and everybody has a constitutional right to their voice and to protect everybody. And same with the Pride event. Keep people that are going to cause problems, keep them away, keep them at bay, pay attention and have an overwatch and make sure those things that we're doing that. But we don't want to be intrusive into these events to where it looks like it's, oh my gosh, it's got to be a police event. It's not a police event. We don't want it to be. So we have a mixture, right? We have a mixture of uniformed personnel on a perimeter that can respond if needed. But then we have folks, I attended the whole event last year, along with the chief and multiple command staff. Same with Black Lives Matter, we just stood right in the crowd. Because it's really about support of all the events. That's kind of what makes the community better, is that we support all the events. And make sure that everybody has a fair,
And
fair
I really
representation.
appreciate that approach. I just want to say thank you
Yeah.
for that, but also, make sure we're thinking about it, looking ahead, not being reactive, as you say, not jumping into something we're not invited to, but.
We actually, with Pride specifically last year, we pre-planned, we had meetings with Keith and walked through different items. And then, APD was really sensitive to Keith's requests on what involvement there was.
Yeah, no, I absolutely.
And there's
appreciate all that.
actually, we could probably dive into it some other time, but there's a lot that goes on in the background that you don't realize that maybe if something's going on downtown, there's resources staged somewhere else ready.
Well, and again, looking at what else is going on, what's the sort of general temperature of the thing and what kind of event is it? And I know that brings a lot of folks downtown for a long period of time and it's been a good draw for the city. There's a lot of good stuff come out of that.
In the same fashion, when they did the block party, when the Growler Garage did the block party, we're expecting a country band to bring 5,000 people into a 3 square or 4 square block. that's just, there's not enough sidewalk space for that many people. I mean, it's unheard of. It took a lot of pre-planning. We had multiple meetings, fire was involved, we were involved, Public Works was involved. And we do this, we have lots of pre-planning for those.
The event permitting process, I suppose, catches that most of the time, right?
Oh, yeah,
Surrounding
yeah.
departments.
Yep. And so, and then we require them to do their legwork before it's approved. You know, and that could be, whether it be event security, personnel, you know, how many staffing you have. And it's the same when you look at like a liquor issue out on the street. So they're all the same. We go through the same process, but we are kind of reactionary in that matter because not everybody picks the same time every year. Now River Rhythms, that's different, right? We know those dates. Those are certain things, but the events like those, we're now not immune to the fact, both us and fire, that and downtown, is that we can have an event across the nation and we'll have to plan for an event that following week, potentially to start somewhere here. And we've seen local agencies, Tualatin, Lake Oswego, who have seen crucial events, brutal events for their cities happen within a week of a major incident just because there wants to be a protest. Well, okay. So that's, we are reactive in
No,
that.
I appreciate that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for that discussion. I'm sorry to take us down a rabbit hole.
I got one question.
Okay.
So last meeting, Chief Harder talked about some possible code changes with churches allowing homeless to camp on that. Is there an update on that?
Well, that's,
And I mentioned it because Hassel mentioned it.
he did, I know, I just saw the article, I was like, oh my gosh. That's right. So it is in the works. It's coming up July 1st, right? The law goes into effect. It happened in 2019. But because of COVID, it was stayed. It's going to go into effect. Essentially what it says is that if the initial law, right, was that if folks are camping in a right of way or they're, you know, blocking public right of ways as such, and you can't just uproot them without a facility, or if you have a facility in your jurisdiction, at the place where they can go, you can say, yes, you need to move. You have a lawful, there's a lawful reason. But just to uproot them without anything, they said no. Well, and so that's changed. Now it is, you need to provide a space, right? And so that's the newest one, is you have to provide a space. And I know it probably caught a lot of people off guard in the public, also, because you're trying to do it quietly. But honestly, if you're the first, if Albany community is the first to build a public space, we're gonna be first to get tons of people that aren't from Albany. And I don't want to make that sound right, but you have a limited number of resources. We're gonna have barely enough resources to cover the sheer population of homeless that within our town. So there's timely, we're gonna follow the law, and we're getting these things passed and getting the code changed. But again, if you're first, they will come is kind of that thought process of
Sweet Home.
I was gonna say, I know Sweet Home got some.
Sweet Home, yeah,
They did,
they did.
yeah,
And
just because I noticed the Parks Department donated land for that.
Last year, that was going pretty well. I don't know if that's not the case anymore, but-
No, it's.
Yeah.
and it's not that it won't.
Yeah.
I think it will, but you also, that makes it incumbent on the city to find the right location for, right? Because they want to ultimately like them spread out, but where are our core services at? Our core services are downtown or down here in the hub. So where do you find those places? And the city just doesn't own all these great pieces of land that you go, oh, we're going to turn this into a place where people can have a tent city. So churches, the reason churches are one of those is because one of the things churches can do is that they have a lot of extra parking there. I mean, some of them have massive space and they can allow it. I don't know how that's going to go over, but having the law there to help them, because it's 180 days. That a temporary is 180 days. And in my mind, I'm like, that doesn't seem temporary. That seems pretty long. That's a 6-month lease on a piece of ground. So we'll see how it works. But in the same token, to have folks move out of the parks, off the sidewalks, out of the green area downtown along the waterfront, and someplace where they're more readily accessible to, services.
Yeah, bus line maybe. Yeah, go a long way.
Well, and healthcare stuff and harm reduction stuff and all
Well,
that.
Yep.
it's just, again, just being able to get groceries.
Yeah. that's-
Well, and getting services from folks who go to them is a huge benefit because we really, I mean, the counts are probably well underestimated because it's so difficult to get to the number of folks that are down along our greenway. And obviously in, probably in the next month, the typical migration is back down to the river for several miles downstream. That's upstream and downstream. That's kind of what happens. So,
Now that I think about it, there's a church in Corvallis that's been doing it for a while too, up in the northwest, part of Corvallis. It's have, I want to say 25 or 30 spots for folks there. And I don't know how many of those would use. I don't know what their wait list looks like. I don't know any of that stuff.
but it is a work in progress and it'll be ready come July. Yeah. So we're still pushing forward with that. Yeah.
Gene,
Okay. So what I'll do is, standard format for the report, I'll walk through it with you, answer any questions you may have, then I have our annual report completed that I'll hand out, and you can peruse it and ask questions, or email or text me questions later on. But as far as, I mean, this report's actually just kind of a lot of numbers here, but you can see that since the last time we met, February and March, our calls are down a little bit, which is nice, around 100 calls a month. So that is a really good surprise. Still though, over the year, we're going to have a busier year than we've ever had, but at least those 1,000 call months have temporarily subsided. March was really nice because 880 calls for 1 month, and that's a 31-day month.
Yeah.
Interestingly though, I track something called the no patient trip rate, the number of times we go out on a medical call and transport versus leaving the patient there. And normally we're at about 44% of our responses. We don't transport somebody. We get there, we triage, provide recommendations. It was down to 34% this last month. So we transported a higher percentage of patients
That's in March. you said.
in March.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see here, response times are staying status quo for the last 4 years, which is amazing given our call volume. The concurrent calls, I probably will remove that and just pepper it throughout the different meetings because it's kind of a messy table. But again, that's the number of times there are multiple incidents occurring at once. So 34.5% of the time there's one call happening. And then if there's one incident happening and another one comes in, that's 2 concurrent incidents. That's an additional 35%. And you can see that typically we have multiple calls happening at once in our town. Similar to what Brad said, it's a far cry from when I started almost 32 years ago. There's just always activity happening. Let's see, I'll switch to the second page. No big changes on the type of calls that we're going to since the last time we talked. The picture I put up there, I just wanted to, we get complaints in the department, 3 big items people call us on. One is no patient trips. Sometimes people, when we go there, we do an assessment, we determine, we don't think you need to go to the hospital by ambulance, you can go via, your family member driving you. Well, then when they get to the hospital and they find out and the doctor says, oh, actually, your oxygen saturations are low, that's something to check, and you have pneumonia, the family then is upset that we actually didn't transport them to the hospital. And so we have to navigate that quite a bit. So that's one. And these don't happen very often. We don't get a lot of complaints. 2, driving. We drive big red vehicles that everybody sees. And so if you don't use a turn signal or you're going a couple miles per, I'm sure you'd never do this.
Completely unheard of.
Yeah, people, will call. The third is sometimes when we go to enforce the fire code. And, people don't necessarily appreciate the codes and requirements that they have to do until they have an incident. And the picture in the chart there, it's difficult to see, but it was an apartment fire we had since the last time we met. And because of the fire code, they were required to partition that apartment complex. And by partition, I mean that there is a firewall that runs up and separates the two combined facilities. Think of maybe like a townhouse would be another example where a firewall is required.
Even in the attic.
It goes all the way up through the attic. And really, when we talk about a firewall, all it is it's a wall, runs up through the attic with extra sheetrock on it. All right, so it's not anything, like, it's not really a huge deal. Or doors aren't hollow core doors, but they're solid doors. And so anyway, the picture there shows that there's this really big fire that happened off of 34th Avenue, and some apartment complexes there. And the fire basically consumed the second story, and it went right up to that firewall, and it never made it to the second half of the building. And so just want to throw out a little pitch that if you ever have constituents talk about they're upset about having to do something because it's an extra cost, in the long run, for the owner of this building, it saved them oodles of money. Okay, let's see here. Since our last meeting, also really happy to report we did our first ever all Spanish CPR class for, yes, it is, for a parent group of Spanish speakers at South Albany High School. So we had 16 adults there, and we have Spanish speakers in our department, and they went out and we taught them CPR. And that's really an area, I think, in our department that we've made move towards improving, starting by encouraging our people to get trained, to learn to speak Spanish, paying them, incentivizing them to do it. And then in our hiring processes, if we have somebody, if we have two candidates that are the same and one is bilingual, that's usually enough to get our attention, especially as our community changes. I think it's really important that as a department, we get good at providing our services in Spanish. Not only the written items we give out, but also the engagement. And we have some employees that it's really important to them that we do it, so they're willing to step up and to make that happen. We have 5 new recruits that are in their academy right now. They're a 10-week academy that we do internally. They will finish up the end of April, and then they'll be released to the wild. And by wild, I mean to the shifts, to the crews, stations.
Sea shift is particularly wild.
That's right. Yeah. And then they will, they're assigned FTOs, field training officers. They're also assigned, we have a mentor program. So our new employees, when we onboard them, we assign them a mentor who's not on their shift, doesn't work with them, isn't in their chain of command. So if they get into a sticky situation where, hey, how do I handle this? That the mentor is supposed to go have coffee with them and coach them on, hey, here's what you do. Or, maybe they'll help the situation out with the intent of just them being successful. So let's see here, our annual report, I'll hand out here in a minute.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
After the last hiring board, how many did we get, and did we get the ones we really wanted?
Yeah. So we had a hiring process, which is looking ahead. We have 2 positions that we need filled. And we offered positions to the top 2, which the one was the gal who won the award from the State Fire Marshal's office. She's also bilingual.
Oh,
And
my, that's great.
She did, she was the clear #1 in
Yeah.
everybody's process.
Yeah.
And then The other person was the clear number 2. And so we offered him. And then I never remember the name, Cynthia. Cynthia participated in our hiring recruitment process. And then there was a third that after you left, the group was good with hiring, but everybody else we pulled. So what we do when we do a recruitment, or not pulled, we'll go back out. When we're done with one of our interviews, we'll leave it up to the panels, the interview panel and the practical panel to draw the line in the sand and say, all right, these are the people this top group will consider. Anybody else, they can come back and try again on a different day. So yeah, we got 3 out of that. That's
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
A little bit kind of about how we do our hiring processes. For some of you who may be new to the group, it starts with, of course, an application. We, minimum qualifications. We then, they have to take National Testing Network is the name of the company that a lot of fire departments use. So it is a video-based scenario test. It's a filter that we're able to use, but it doesn't do a good job saying this person's going to be a great employee, this person's not. All right. But it does help us filter people out and maybe pull out some people that are maybe abrasive or have some traits that we don't want in our department. So from there, they also have to have a CPAT, Candidate Physical Agility Test. So they have to have a valid card. It's a national standard physical agility test that it's the same test in Oregon as it is in New York City. And departments want to use it, they can. We do, because it's legally validated. And it also allows opportunities for people to practice that, maybe if you're not plugged into a fire department, or you have friends in a fire department that have access to the gear, you can actually sign up to go practice doing that. And so, it hopefully opens doors for people that maybe otherwise those doors wouldn't be open. So from there, we go to an interview where Cynthia has been a part of our interview process early on in my assistant chief time, we met. It's like, you know what? We're going to bring her
It's
in.
been at least 8 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so they go through an interview, they go through a skills assessment. We decide if we want to offer them a job. They then get a conditional job offer. We do background. We hire a background investigator to. You might be used to this. For me as a firefighter, I feel dirty sometimes reading the backgrounds because it's honestly stuff that I don't know. I really need to know how your relationship with your high school girlfriend from 12 years ago, type of thing, or high school boyfriend. And so very invasive or intrusive. And then from there, they sit with the psychiatrist to make sure that they're capable of and will fit and be able to do the job. And then if it's and then we finally offer them the position. So pretty lengthy process to get them going. Well, let's see here, looking ahead. So we've had good luck with grants lately. We got the assistant firefighter grant to buy a fire truck. We received the SAFER grant that we have 3 people that actually we're onboarding right now that will increase our staffing for 3 years, paid for by the federal government 100% for 3 years. Well, we also found out we found out last Friday that we are going to be a recipient of one of the Office of the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office mobile water tender. So our current water tender is from 1994. It also, because of how the county works, we're very possessive of it, and we don't just send it on conflagrations or outside of our city. So the State Fire Marshal's office, through some funding that they received through the last biennial budget, they had a grant program that they offered all fire departments in Oregon to basically add capacity, vehicle capacity to the fire service workforce, if you will, or apparatus force. And there are 192 applications, 76 departments received a vehicle, and we were one of them. So we're super excited about that. We also received a $10,000 grant for things that we've already done, which is the best grant ever. That one, I'm retrospectively having to go to the council to get permission for, because it was one of these deals where OSFM reached out and said, hey, it was on a Tuesday, you're doing all these things. If you apply for this grant by Friday, you're probably going to get that money. And so we're like, okay, for forgiveness from council, and we'll do what we got to do. And
But
so
we're bringing in money.
we're bringing in $10,000 for items that we've already do.
Was that community risk reduction or what was that?
Yeah, yep. Stephanie Stafford
Yep.
is our liaison. And yeah, she's like, hey, you're doing
That,
these
that was a
three
hurry up
things.
program too, so it's good that folks, yeah, that was a win all around.
Oh, totally. Okay, let's see here. So firefighters, I mentioned, also not on here, because Adam's mom left us to retire. We were hiring an ambulance billing specialist.
You can't just tell Romy to work harder. Okay.
I know, right? Yeah. I don't think I can get any more out of that.
He works pretty hard.
He sometimes already taps out sometimes and says, I can't do anymore.
I get that.
So we did video interviews today. And I affectionately refer to those as our version of speed dating. They're 10 minutes,
Do you
couple
get the pre-recorded
questions.
ones or are they live?
They're live, and
Okay,
it
yeah.
goes really fast.
Because I know some places are now having you record a video that then everybody gets to watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't like it.
Yeah, we did the same thing on the firefighter side. 2 questions, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna take 5 people to interviews here in 2 weeks and hopefully get somebody on board shortly. Budget process update. Thankfully, this biennial budget's different than the previous one, where we came to you and asked for a letter of support for police and fire. This one, as far as, I don't know all the details about PD, what you submitted, but for fire, we're whole, which is great considering last year we had layoff meetings and we ended up laying off 3 people, but it was a tough time for the department. This go around, we're good and will remain whole. However, I mentioned before about ground emergency medical transport funding that we received. And we're going to leverage some of that money and start and add capacity to our ambulance service. And we'll be hiring, assuming the budget process goes through. We've gone through our internal process with the city manager, finance director. Then we go to the budget committee on April 18th and April 20th, potentially the 21st, over those 3 days. So if it goes through, we'll hire 2 paramedics, 2 EMTs, and we will staff an additional ambulance 7 days a week during those times on the front page, those peak times. So probably from 9 to 9-ish, something around there, 9 to 1900. To where we'll add capacity to our system. We track something on the EMS side called, and I haven't gotten into this with you before, but it's called unit hour utilization. And we're measuring the amount of time that people are out on calls. And there are some sweet spots where your crews are busy, but they're still able to get their reports done. They're still able to get their training done. They're able to eat lunch. Well, over some of these busy months, we've pushed up against the threshold of not the system breaking, but where people are going to start getting grumpy. And we pushed up against that, and I think some people started to kind of feel the wear and tear. There also is component of that of having units available, right? You can't have all your units out on calls. You have to have people available for the next call. So I think that's going to help with that. Even in the meantime, over the last few months, well, actually since January, we've what we call upstaff. We bring people in on overtime, and we're staffing an additional medic unit on our busiest days of the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Crews would love to see it 7 days a week, and that's what hopefully the single rule plan will do. But we need to put a Band-Aid on it before we actually try to fix it. And so we're in the process of fixing that.
I have a quick question,
Please.
and it's one I keep forgetting to ask every meeting for months. Firemen,
Yes.
I know that it covers us locally. But when I was hospitalized in the ER and they couldn't find me a room during the pandemic and they were talking about life flighting me out, where would that affect me?
So, okay, complicated question in
Yeah,
a way, but also simple. So the simple answer is a life flight, unless you subscribe for their membership service, you would be on the hook for that transport. However, so that's a simple. And now Life Flight does have a membership subscription service, just like we offer firemen. But where it gets complicated, and I'm not an expert in it with air ambulance, but recently there's federal legislation called the No Surprise Act that if you don't have the say, or you don't know what the No Surprise Act, you don't get a surprise bill.
that would be nice.
And you being transported from one hospital to the next would be a big surprise, right? If you get a $10,000, $15,000 bill and the insurance covers just a small fraction of that. So the air ambulance companies are really, I would predict they're going to start to struggle because of that funding restriction. And that's the hard part. I get the consumer side of it, but I also get the side of having the air ambulance available.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
So I don't know really what your bill would have been.
Ooh, I don't even wanna think about it.
That I think they could only charge you essentially what Medicare is willing to pay.
Yeah.
So jumping forward, more than you need to know, but actually just a couple months ago, I wrote a letter to our different federal representatives for our area. There's a push to add ground ambulance to the No Surprise Act. So that's a potential problem for maintaining our service. Because what normally would be, let's say, a $1,500 transport, if we can only get what Medicare pays, which is $450, there's this huge write-off. And even the $1,500 ambulance fee doesn't cover the cost of the service. It's augmented by our community. It's problematic. And in my letter to the representatives, I mean, I get the consumer side. I'm a consumer, just like everybody else. I get frustrated when I get a hospital bill from Samaritan Health and I can't figure it out, and it's just crazy expensive. I mean, so you have to call and to get some guidance on it.
Yeah.
Especially when things get coded differently and then your insurance will pay it because it's not coded right.
Oh, yeah, that's always a nice.
No, it's never the coder's fault, never.
So, my point in the letter, though, is that our fees they're not arbitrarily set. They're set in a public setting. They're set by elected officials. You could go to a city council meeting when it's on the agenda and say, things need, this is too much. And you probably get, maybe get the council to, certainly they're gonna listen to you and they may agree. So, but anyway, so that was a long-winded answer. I don't know what your bill would have been, but there are laws to protect you.
Yeah, because it wasn't like I had an option. It was like, they needed to get me in a hospital now, and there wasn't a hospital bed from Seattle down. And they were talking about Idaho, and I'm kind of going, I don't know, and he says, oh, this isn't an optional thing, And they finally got me into Legacy, up in Portland. But, just, nobody had, well, they had a bed.
No.
The problem was
No
they didn't
staff.
have a on staff person that could deal with my condition.
We were taking transfers during that time to just about every hospital in the state. We were taking people to Klamath Falls. We were taking people to Coos Bay.
Well, you could read me up I-5 to Portland at midnight. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, those exotic transfers is what we call them internally. We kind of have a little warped sense of humor a little bit, but they're, to these different hospitals that honestly, they're not like higher level of care. They were literally just a place for the patient to be.
Yeah.
Those have dramatically declined. And, now we're back to what it was before, where most of our transfers are because the patient needs higher acuity. They need more
Yeah.
care than Albany is.
That was what happened.
Now they're back to regular levels of staffing problems instead of the same levels of staffing problems they were at
Yeah.
a year ago.
Okay, thank you. I've been meaning to ask that for months.
Let's see here, and then we have Safety Camp, which is a joint venture between APD and AFD. We're doing that again, June 26th, 29th at Oak Grove Elementary. And just specifically for you two, I've jotted down in my notes that here next week, the city's adopting a new natural hazard mitigation plan. We've gone through that process. And then as Lynn County Fire Defense Board Chief, working with Lynn County, we're updating their community wildfire protection plan, which these are big, huge binders full of information that's been gathered through, community interviews, risk maps of high danger areas. And we take that information, both these plans, and then we start developing goals of items that we want to accomplish. And the other thing that they provide is they provide justification when we go out and ask for money from grants. And so, it shows that we've done the legwork and what we're asking for has been pre-identified as an issue in our community. And that, sure both of you can attest, that raises the success rate of being able to bring money into our community to fix some of these issues.
When was the last time it was updated? Just out of curiosity. Sure, it's been a while.
The
Wildfire protection.
Yeah, so I think 2007.
Long overdue.
It was long overdue.
Good.
Yeah. And the crazy part with some of these grants, there are grants that we're able to apply for and get to update these plans to help us
Get the
apply to get
grants.
grants. So,
I love
And not to make it sound any sillier than it is, because that's my experience, not wrong, but part of the value is in the process, right? That every time you do that, you have public meetings, you reach a new audience, you get landowners in you didn't have before. So it's not just about the binder that looks cool on the shelf when you're done, right? It's about who you talk to. And it's about friends you make along the way.
oh yeah, oh totally. Well, we found things in the city's natural hazard mitigation plan where, let's use wildfire as an example, where really when you think about the city of Albany proper, the risk of wildfire is maybe not as great from people who do this day in and day out as the potential flood. Right? We flood almost every year. So, but to what Eric said, when you go out and you start polling the community and soliciting input, wildfire actually rose really high. That is something that is on our community's mind. And we would not have known that had we gone out and done the homework. And so, while we still, so as fire chief, what that tells me is our community is craving even though the risk might not be as high as some other things, they are craving information. And we need to get to them. So, end report.
Okay,
Chair Green,
Yeah.
you know the danger of letting me ask questions, so can I have a minute or two?
go for it.
Shane, if you don't mind, I noticed that the apartment fires staff on the report here is pretty low, pretty far down the list.
Yeah.
And so as a frequent occurrence, it doesn't rank that high, right? But to your point about how much personnel time it consumes to respond to the event and its subsequent consequences, right? That's probably pretty high. And then also the impact of the community is pretty high too, right? And I think that's part of, Brad, that's part of how your stats are structured. Not only how many of them happen and how many of your personnel respond to it, but what is the consequence to the broader community, right? That's why some of them get bumped up. So
The apartment fire could displace 20+ people.
and so that's what I'm thinking, right? Like I live over here close to the Carnegie Library, so I know that there was that apartment building that burned on July 4th, right? And then there was the one down just right over here that was a couple months later, and then now this is the third one in 9 months. So in a town that's already got a housing problem, it's already got high housing costs and not enough units, taking those structures offline has a big impact on the community, right? And they're offline for a year, probably. I mean, building materials aren't as costly as they were for a while, but is that something that it doesn't factor into your response clearly, but it's something you think about in your annual report, it's something you think about in your sort of presentation to the budget committee? I mean, is that something you think about in a strategy or a process that the department engages in?
I don't know that we have systems set up to deal with apartment fires, but do we have, that's not really a talking point.
Okay.
I think that we,
Yeah.
that we
Because
mentioned.
that's a lot of housing units for the city of Albany that are going to be out for quite a while, so.
We've ever made that nexus.
Yeah, well, and maybe there's no, I mean, if there's no place, you don't have anything to take action on, right, then there's no point to track it.
But it becomes a talking point though.
Right,
Yeah.
right, again, if it goes somewhere,
Yeah.
if somebody asks you a question about it in a public forum. which
Well,
this is
okay.
not you guys do.
So I think kind of, let's bring this full circle to fire code issues.
Yeah,
When,
yeah.
and this happens, when somebody wants to build an apartment complex, and it's important that our fire marshal stays firm on the fire code, and the new complex is
Yeah.
being built on the east side of town, they have sprinkler systems in them.
Yep.
And they have things to keep fires small, so people aren't displaced.
Precisely,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know that in our office,
No, it's gonna be
Chief Hawkins is having that conversation like multiple times a day with state legislators. Right, we're feeling the pressure to get more housing units built.
Which
And
will
he's-
lower the cost.
And he's standing there saying, no, you must have, right, these features in order to make it safe, in order to prevent it from doing whatever. So, but on a local level, you're not choosing what fire code the state adopts necessarily. You're not, but there are other things right in play. And I think likewise, I mean, enforcement issues can take a different path depending on what the consequences of that event is to the community, right? So I don't know, it's fodder for discussion again. Clearly, I'm not the nuts and bolts sort of guy like that, but I'm up here head in the clouds kind of thing. So
Yeah, it's good.
I'll read the report and I'll see what I should have known before I ask the questions.
Oh, no, and email me if you have questions about the report.
Thank
You can go through it now if you want, but you can also just email me or call me, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you know, anything more about House Bill 29-6 and whether it's to write letters or anything?
Do you have it in front of you? Do you have the bill? What's the bill of it? There's
I'm
only,
reading the minutes.
there's only a few thousand.
Is
Jeez.
Yeah.
I
is
mean,
that the one regarding the fentanyl, the drug?
2906, we talked about that last time. didn't we?
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure what she brought up.
Is that the one where if you
It's the criminal-
distribute,
Distribute.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, meaning making it you distribute it and it causes a death, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So initially, way back when I was running the drug unit 15 years ago, when the first Len Bias case came out, right? If you caused the death, if you delivered a lethal dose of narcotics or whatever, killed somebody in an illicit drug, that you were subject to prosecution for criminally negligent homicide, right? So, but a lot of that, it's very, very, very difficult to prove those cases. The lethality of fentanyl and some of the stuff that's now coming on top of fentanyl is so high, and it's so widely known. We need to have something to stop the delivery of these things. You can't just, again, when I say we're putting a Band-Aid on it, right? You can deal with drug usage all day long and until people choose to stop or go to a program and get some assistance to stop. That's one thing. But to get people from stop delivering it, right? Stop the chain somewhere, because it is. I mean, literally, it is so lethal for these people that have, especially people who've never taken it before, right? Or you take it, you get a couple shots of Narcan. They don't take a trip because they come out of it and they're mad that we've ruined their high. Well, we've only ruined the high. We haven't, the drug has not dissipated from their system. So they turn around because they haven't had a high, find it again, they now have double that in their system, making the next dose even worse. Or the newest, which is called Trank, it's an animal tranquilizer, right? Vet tranquilizer. It lengthens or expands the length of time that the high lasts, because it's a fairly short one for that. So, but Narcan doesn't affect it. So it's even worse. So yes, we were, any support we can get for the delivery of this type of controlled substance that kills someone, yes. Yeah, we're in favor of it. We would like to see the wholesale turn back of why we would decriminalize hard narcotics. I have no clue in my mind why we would. Why we would. But that's.
Nobody I've talked to can make any sense of that.
There's no doubt in my mind,
Everybody's
people.
kind of scratching their head like, how did that pass?
Well, I'm sure it passed because we really want people want what's best for them, and that's to get help, right? Not to put them in prison. I get that, and I'm in agreement. We don't need to fill our prisons, it's costly. But at the same point, the sheer number of crimes that they're committing in, number one, in obtaining it, and then continuing to have it. Our property crimes, our burglaries, our robberies, our thefts, all of that, a majority of that comes from the need to source funds for drug use. It's not free, right?
Can I ask a question? I'm gonna ask a question of you, Brad.
Oh, God. You're gonna kill me.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, because thankfully I don't know the answer to this. But like, what's it cost to go, like if I wanted to, if I was an habitual fentanyl user, what would my daily fix cost? Or if I used meth, like how much money does this
Yeah,
stuff
I
cost?
don't have any concept.
Well, so we'll just go back a little bit. Let's say you needed to have an oxy and you needed to smoke a narcotic analgesic. You put it on a piece of tinfoil, you light it up, you inhale the smoke, the black burning smoke that's coming off of the tinfoil, right? So you're ingesting the drug nasally through the smoke, right? So you get a prescription of them for a fairly inexpensive amount, but on the street, those typically a 5 milligram pill will go anywhere between, well, $8 to $10 for one.
How many do they have to do?
Oh, that would go. Oh, yeah, that would, you would probably need, I'd say 8 to 10 a day. They're smoking.
That's for dedicated use for.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
could be $100.
It could be, yeah. You have to remember, say a lot of, in the drug world, a lot of folks trade or barter, or they just give stuff away. It may not just be money, right? They may steal something, they'll give a chainsaw. Oh, hey, yeah, I can get, 50, 100 pills or whatever. But that's what, what we're seeing are these 5,000 and 10,000 load pills. We're talking lots of quantities of these pills coming up and being sold. And they are just flooding in. The seizures that we're seeing are massive amounts of these pills. Where it used to be prescription, right? They were actually legitimate prescribed pills. And now these are all illicit, falsely made, they're fake pills, right? They make them look like legitimate pills, but they're fake. They have pill presses, but they're expensive.
It turns out the supply for prescriptions is not entirely innocent either, right? Like they were just out there because they're great things to have. They're out there because the companies that made them wanted them out there and had partnerships with doctors and all kinds of things. So, I'm not trying to be conspiratorial about it. I'm just saying that the supply is coming from one place or another, right? So.
There's only like 3 or 4 places that actually manufacture the actual product, right? But then it gets shipped, it gets cut, it gets remolded into these pill presses all across our southern hemisphere, and they come across, and it's primarily from the south, and it's unfortunate, but it's very difficult to stop the source. That's, I guess it's always an old adage, right? Is the punishment going to deter? Is the threat of punishment going to deter someone's criminal behavior? I guess if I were,
Three variables.
I'm.
But and how do we know that? Right? I mean, look at vandalism stats, right? Does citing people for vandalism reduce the next act of vandalism? I mean, I don't know what the.
It's more of an accountability
But that
than it
comes
is.
into your conversation of having boots on the ground and actually being able to, you're spread so thinly where vandalism's up because they're busy doing other things.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's the lesser of the evils. It really is. And when you're doing more priority calls, people get frustrated, believe me, because the same complaints that Shane hears, we hear the same thing. Oh my God, it took you 30 minutes to get to my noise complaint. It's like, it's a noise complaint. I mean, people talk about response times, and I know Shane battles this all the time because response times for medical are crucial, right? Someone's having a medical problem. We want your national response time. They keep it way down. Well, people are calling in a crime in progress or something else that our priority 1 calls. I want them taken within a minute, and I want them dispatched to an officer within a minute, and I want a 5-minute cap on when we get there. We can't get it. That's a goal, but I can't meet it. But I got to have a goal that we used to, but I can no longer meet that goal. It's a numbers game. We are just barely over 1 officer per 1,000, right? With 60,000 people, and we have 65 sworn, but a bunch of those are detectives, patrol officers. If I have 40 patrol officers, our sworn versus our population is barely, and the national average is about 1.8 to 2. So we're almost 1 below. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out the bigger the population, the wider spread you are. Same with fire. You got to travel a greater distance. You all travel in town. How long is it? And granted, we're centrally located, but how long does it take us to get from here to an emergency call over by Walmart?
Especially when people don't pull over.
Or unseen, or.
Or up in North Albany, and so those are all things. That's why we try and encourage our folks, stay in your district. But ultimately, you do get pulled back to type long reports or to put in evidence. There's things that require them to come back. So it's a numbers game, and you're constantly beating that back.
Well, and Shane, you were talking about the complaints, and I feel for the dispatchers. I mean, because when I think back to December 23rd, when John had a fall on the ice, and that was the ice day
Yeah.
that everybody was following. And the dispatcher said, is he injured? I said, I don't know. I can't get that far. He's on ice. I said, let me put it this way. He's 85 and he's laying on ice and it's 29 degrees outside. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt really bad, you know, because I know the dispatcher was doing her job, but it was like, how do you just, I don't know if he's hurt. I can't get that close. Or you're gonna have two of us break up off the ice, you know? And so, you know,
Job I could not do.
Yeah.
It's so much
For
respect.
this
Oh.
in particular, yeah.
yeah, they deserve battle pay.
Being in a dispatch center, just a simple car accident. I mean, they get 10, 12, 15 calls on one accident, and each one, they have to filter through to make sure that everybody's talking about the same accident, and there's not something else happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If there aren't any more questions, is there any business members that we need to deal with tonight? Okay,
Well, Chair, I know I've talked a lot tonight, but I had one more question, I guess, and in that sense, has this group had presentations either from different programs that the departments offer or from maybe other community groups that might be related? That's something we've ever done? Is it something we're interested in doing?
So in my almost 4 years as chief, no.
So if the community paramedic wanted to come in and do a show and tell
We
one
wanted
night, or
to
if
do a
the-
Yeah,
show and tell.
yeah.
something like that, that might be.
Our former
That
public
was me.
safety
I don't know
advisory
whether
board.
members think. I don't wanna be
We
the only
used
guy
to-
talking here, but.
Yeah, we used to do that in our former, or, under Mario. We'd do a public safety advisory board and we would go out to the community and we would typically bring some of this, because listening to me or Marcia or Jane every time about some of the same stuff.
Oh, no, come on.
No, okay, right.
No, don't put those.
it just
don't
wouldn't
put
be a
those
meeting
words in
without
their
you
mouth.
guys.
Right, but I always did find it informative. So like if Christian Dell showed up and could speak directly about him changing the codes and what it looks like, you know, it's, we see him, we review him, and then it's 1 year and out the other. Yes, it's on the way, it's coming. Because you have so many hundreds of things you're looking at every week. So sometimes if you know, that would be up to the board and said, hey, could we hear from somebody or something?
If we're interested in doing something like that, make a suggestion. I'll run it up the chain and we'll
Yeah.
find out what we can do.
Would emailing you, a couple weeks or a month ahead of time be a good way to do that? Yeah. Okay, all right, good, and I think if one of the chiefs or one of the representatives wanted to bring somebody in, right, that could, the agenda could usually accommodate that probably most of the time.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember when the one role, when Chief Radner was talking about the single role. And it would have been fun to have somebody come in that was working that to answer questions. And so, yeah, I can see.
Or some of this new
Great
gear,
potential.
or, something to show and tell, like, this is really cool, that we got, hey, let's come show it off to folks.
Yeah.
Kirsten Glasser? Yeah, yeah, our new mental health
I guess we have to.
Yeah.
specialist, yeah.
Okay.
We put new
I
equipment.
don't want, I mean, that's the thing, is like, I'm the new kid, I don't want to, like, if we've all done this before, and we're all good, we don't need to, I don't want to use up the commission's time.
I'm always open to suggestions of how we can enhance the meetings. Yeah. Makes it more worthwhile for everybody.
What's that?
You bring a puppy dog.
Yeah, Bentley.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Introduce Bentley. I mean,
Well, I
because really you
remember
can keep
when
them down
Marcia
to 10 or
did with,
15, a presentation to 10 or 15 minutes,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
It's not that difficult.
Or honestly, if you're all really smart people, we could also just give you the report and then,
Where's the fun in that?
yeah, and cover a couple extra items and
Yeah.
ask questions and then have the presenter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I remember when Marcia came in, when they were first, was it Bentley?
Yep.
The police.
But give us what was the dog before Bentley that didn't last that long?
Oh,
Because he was kind of like the
Duke?
wellness
Duke.
pup around here,
Duke.
right?
Yeah, I think it was that dog, yeah.
Yeah, and I know.
yeah, he didn't pass. He didn't pass.
kept her on her heels.
Yeah,
that night,
right,
get out,
yeah.
get out. But yeah, that would be fun, something like that.
I mean, no Citizens Academy comes up once a year, and I
Uh-huh.
try to do that when it's available too, but,
Had Sandy
In
do
between.
kind of our PubMed outreach stuff. talk about that.
Laura with our social media. I mean,
Yeah.
things that,
Yeah.
a lot of our public outreach stuff that, yeah.
Well, Well, and it's through this group that I found out about the fire department installing lock boxes, emergency lock boxes. And I hate to tell you how many times that has saved us, not having our front door knocked down, you know? And we've even told our neighbors about it. Several of them have got, they went, well, how much does it cost? I said, it doesn't cost you anything. Go get a key made. You know, well, but how much privacy do I have? I said, they're only gonna come if you call them. You know?
We really don't want to spend much time there.
Yeah. Well, why, I wouldn't want them to have my key. I said, they don't. They have a key to the lockbox, and the lockbox has your key.
If you put out cookies and coffee, though, I might come without asking.
Yeah. But you know, having Sandy come in would be something like that to keep us more informed of some of the ancillary services that are available to the citizenry.
Got her in notes, so, yeah, just do the chain.
Yeah.
Make that happen.
If there's nothing else, our next meeting date is Wednesday, June 7th at Fire Station 11. And unless there's an objection, we're adjourned.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.
I'm so glad you came and joined us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me too, I just can't drive enough, so that's why.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and-
I'm with you. At least if there's